now time for the Billy C. Show, part of the BillyCBoxing.com.
Coming to you live from the Billy C. Studios in Lake George, New York. I'm Bill Calogero, and it's time for the Billy C. Show. Good morning, good day, good evening, whenever you're watching, whenever you're listening. I hope you're doing okay today. Today's show is being brought to you in part by the Title Bout Championship computer game. Get yourself a copy right now. Visit our website, BillyCBoxing.com, and click the Title Bout banner. Can't miss it. Today's show is also being brought to us in part by Southern Gourmet Spice.com. That's the place, man. That's where I get my stuff. You know what I mean? My stuff. It's good on anything. Kenny Bear's barbecue rub, his Cajun blackened spice, and his all-purpose salt. The bomb. Check it out. SouthernGourmetSpice.com. Tell him Billy C sent you. And finally, today's show being brought to us in part by my book, Tom Molino, From Bondage to Baddest Man on the Planet, is available right now where all good books are sold. You can get a copy right now where you're watching or listening to this very show. Just visit Barnes & Noble or Amazon.com. Want a signed copy? No problem. Drop me an email. Billy@TalkinBoxing. TalkinBoxing.com. Well, a little delay today. Microsoft decided to do an update. You know, it wasn't even a little quickie. It was one of these hour and 45-minute updates. You know, they like to do you thinking, you know, are we becoming stupid? You know, technology is so advanced. Are we becoming stupid? I mean, I watch people walking around like this with their, you can't even BS anybody if you say, oh yeah, Mike Tyson was heavyweight champ for 15 years. You know, oh really? Google, was Mike Tyson a champion? Oh no, you're wrong. You know, no more bar stool betting, right? Not with Siri hanging around and Alexa, and Google, and, Anyway, boxing. Couple fights last night. I'll give you my quick thoughts. We got Dax chomping at the bit to come on. We got Alex Papali chomping at the bit to come on. I got some emails to read. We got some news to discuss. First and foremost, Joseph Parker won a split decision over Parker-Chisora to improve to 29 wins, 2 losses, with 21 of his wins coming by knockout. Parker-Chisora drops to 32-11 with 23 knockouts. The way the judges scored it, one saw it 115, 113 for Chisora. One had it 116, 111, and the other had it 115, 113, both for Parker, giving him the split decision win. My thoughts on the fight? I think it was a close fight. I would have been okay either way. I'm not so sure about the 116, 111. Parker was the better fighter. There's no question about it. If Joseph Parker had a little more pop, this guy would be a tough out. I mean, he's got some fast hands. He's accurate with his punches. But the beginning of the fight, Parker-Chisora was landing body shot after body shot after body shot. These weren't just going through the motions and landing on elbows and stuff like that. He was landing them. And based on the judges' scorecards, it doesn't look like they gave him credit for it. So we'll get Dax's thought and Alex's thought a little bit later. Would have been okay with a draw. I find myself saying that lately, which kind of sucks. But in any event, also on that card, Dmitry Bivol improved to 18-0 with 11 knockouts when he won a 12-round decision over Craig Richards. 118-110 was the way one judge scored it. And the other two had it substantially closer, 115-113, 115-114. It was a decent fight. This wasn't a typical Bivol fight. I don't know. I want to see Bivol fight Canelo. I'm sorry. I want to see those two fight. But we'll see. Also on that card, Katie Taylor improved to 18-0 with 6 knockouts in a tough fight with Natasha Jones. I thought Natasha Jones was landing the harder shots, maybe just not enough. 96-94, and 2 judges had it 96-95, all in favor of Katie Taylor. There's only one Ricky Hatton's, Campbell Hatton, He improved to 2-0 with 2 knockouts. Again, winning a decision. One big difference between him and Pop's, lack of pop. But again, he fought a guy winless in his second pro fight. And Chris Eubank returned to the ring. Believe it or not, he's still an interim champion for the WBA. I'm going to get to the WBA in a few minutes, man. I've about had it with the WBA. But he won a 10-round decision against Marcus Morrison. At times, it looked like it was going to be a tough fight, but then it seemed like Eubank was just toying with Morrison. He is now being trained, I guess, or getting the tutelage of Roy Jones Jr., and he fought very Roy Jones Jr.-esque. At one point, he had Morrison in all kinds of trouble and just backed off and figured, let me get some more rounds. 98-92 with the way all 3 judges scored that one. Another fight, WBA super welterweight champion, Erslandy Lara. He went up in weight to win the WBA middleweight title. How many titles does the WBA have? I mean, what did it... Anyway, he improved to 28 wins, 3 losses, 3 draws, with 16 wins coming by knockout, and he picked up the 16th knockout when he knocked out Thomas Cornflake LaManna, who drops to 30 wins, 5 losses, and 1 draw, with 12 of his wins coming by knockout. Lara's 38 years old right now. Where does the WBA pick fighters to challenge for their titles? I mean, no disrespect to LaManna, but I mean, I could see giving Lara a chance at the middleweight title, but come on, man. How did LaManna? I have a whole thing I'm going to get to in a second because I'm going to jump back to the heavyweight division. Speaking of heavyweight division, Andy Ruiz got up off the canvas and then won a fight against Ruiz-Arreola last night. Ruiz improves to 34 wins, 2 losses, with 22 wins coming by knockout. And Ruiz-Arreola loses for the 7th time. He's now 38 wins, 7 losses, and a draw. 33 of his wins coming by knockout. The way the judges scored it, 118-109 twice and 117-110, all in favor of Andy Ruiz. I got to have, listen, to be honest with you, I can't believe that this fight went to the scorecards like this. Ruiz hit the deck in this fight in the second round, and to be honest, I thought it was closer. Ruiz has got fast hands and everything else. All of a sudden, they're talking like he's the super great fighter. He looked good in terms of conditioning, but I don't know. I thought the fight was closer. I didn't score it. But here's my thoughts real quick before I go and get the guys on. But what's happening to the sport of boxing, man? I mean, it's being mocked. Think about it. On June 5th, you got, which I don't mind this fight, but this is a thriller pay-per-view, Teofimo Lopez against George Kambosos for the title. Evander Holyfield's on this card against Kevin McBride. Now, I don't care about that. But then, the next night you got a pay-per-view, which I hope none of you watching this show or listening to this show, I hope none of you shell out a penny to watch Floyd Mayweather and Logan Paul. I mean, is this a bullshit fight or what? I mean, 100% bullshit fight. Don't forget Kenny Bear's Barbecue Rub. Get yourself, SouthernGourmetSpice.com. I'll be pointing to that in a little bit. Oh, did I just throw out a little plug? Yeah, I did, because I see my man Kenny in the chat room, and he probably missed the plug at the beginning of the show. But anyway. And then we got a YouTuber against a TikToker in a boxing match. I mean, come on, YouTuber, TikToker, Logan Paul, Jake Paul fought last week. I mean, come on, man. This is bullshit, okay? And here's where it even gets rough for me to deal with. Trevor Bryan. Now, I hope Dax is turning off his volume right now because I know he's big on Trevor Bryan because he knew him personally and helped train him as an amateur. But he's a WBA champion. Oh, you didn't know that? Yeah, he's a WBA heavyweight champ. And, he's talking some smack. He wants to fight Anthony Joshua, wants to fight Tyson Fury, wants to fight Mike Tyson. He says, I'm the only heavyweight in the United States. I'm hungry. I'm the young lion. I could beat them all. I'm even willing to give Tyson the opportunity. All right, so here's the deal. If you recall, Bryan won the title from Stavern. Yeah, let's go back in history a little bit because Trevor Bryan won the title January of this year when he stopped Bermane Stavern in the 11th round. He's 21-0 with 15 knockouts. Bermane Stavern, let's go back in time a little bit. He had the title going into his fight against Deontay Wilder in 2015 in January, and he lost it via decision. It was a decent fight. We all wanted to see the rematch. But wait, because in November of that year, 2015, Stavern, which, as we will come to find out, was busy, he beat Derek Rossi in a 10-round decision. 2 years later, he gets his rematch with Deontay Wilder in November of 2017 and was blown out in less than a round. 2 years go by and he fights Joe Joyce in September of 2019 and gets knocked out in 6 rounds. Then, 2 years, almost 2 years again, he somehow gets to fight Trevor Bryan for the vacant WBA World Heavyweight title this year? I mean, what's up with that? And speaking of Trevor Bryan, no disrespect, but this is a guy who's 21-0 with 15 knockouts. Now, granted, he's a WBA champion. 21-0 with 15 knockouts. His combined opponent record is 268 wins, 229 losses, and 18 draws. The most known name, besides Bermane Stavern on his record, is Derek Rossi. A win over Derek Rossi. When you look at of his 21 wins, only 8 were fighters that had winning records. And of those 8, only 2 of them had double-digit losses. Galen Brown and Afinio Mendoza, with almost 500 records, 44-33, and the other one's 40-20 something or whatever. And this is the WBA champion. I got news for you. If I'm Mike Tyson, I take the fight against Trevor Bryan because Mike Tyson, at 50-something years old, can beat Trevor Bryan, in my opinion. Can beat him right now. So if I'm him, I definitely take this fight. I mean, what's going on? What's going on with the sport? The WBA headlines the BS in this sport with their title holders, the people that they give title shots to, etc., etc. Makes me sick. Really, it makes me sick. But anyway, hey, listen, this call I'm going to be getting on right now with my man Dax Khan is being brought to us by, you guessed it, the Southern Gourmet Spice Company. Get yourself a bottle of Kenny Bear's barbecue rub. I put it on everything. And my new favorite that I'm still waiting for is the Cajun seasoning, man. He's got the Cajun seasoning and an all-purpose salt that is to die for. Check it out, southerngourmetspice.com. And that's the only stuff that you should be putting on anything. And let me tell you something. It tastes good on everything. Trust me when I tell you. And I'm going to bring Dax on right now, but he's I don't think he's there. You there, Dax?
Yeah, well, you're giving out plugs, so I said, you know what, I'm going to get up and get a drink of water.
Well, there you go. I give out quick plugs, man. Quick plugs. Hey, I figured you'd be all jacked up with me talking smack about Trevor Bryan, and nothing against him, but the WBA, unbelievable. But let's get to the fights first. The Derek Chisora, Joseph Parker fight, I enjoyed it. I didn't think that the body work that Chisora, incorporated in the beginning of the fight was being scored properly. The fight was close. I wouldn't have been shocked if they gave it to Chisora. What was your thoughts on the fight?
I'm a huge Derek Chisora fan. How can you not be? Our guy, Marty McKay, last night had kind of summed him up perfectly. He said he's a better version of Burt Cooper, meaning that he's always going to come out, he's going to give a great fight. He just doesn't have what it takes to come over that hump and get to the elite level. But Chisora is always going to go out on his back, or, he's going to go out on a one-sided loss. Yeah, he's going to keep coming forward. And Chisora, unfortunately, now is 37 years old. He hasn't been able to keep a steady trainer throughout his career. Joseph Parker, I actually thought that, we were going to see another Arthur Spilka moment from that early knockdown, even though Parker was kind of in the corner and squared up. And Chisora just kept coming on, and I'm figuring, all right, Chisora's going to catch him in one of these rounds, even though Parker does have a durable chin despite being down a few times, and Chisora gassed. And that happened to be the issue. But there were a lot of times during that fight, Bill, that I really thought Parker was falling behind. If you go and check our social media feed, I actually had stated at one point, does Parker have an Andy Lee moment where he can come back from behind and score that one-punch stoppage? But Joseph Parker isn't a big one-punch artist. So I think if Chisora didn't gas out, he would have won that fight by a wide margin. Parker, a much better boxer. But once he reached the level where he was no longer facing the lower caliber of opponents as he did up to the Andy Ruiz fight, once winning that WBO title, it kind of seems like Joseph Parker lost a little bit of that killer instinct.
I think that if he had a little more pop, Dax, he would be a tough out. I said it earlier. His hands are quick, and the thing I like about Joseph Parker is that he's very accurate with his punches. I did see a change in Chisora, maybe a little too late at 38, but, with Buddy McGirt in his corner, he seemed more controlled. What was with the googly eyes throughout the fight? It almost looked like he was going to lose his mind. I like Chisora too. I know you've been a big fan of him and Dillian White. Chisora, and I love Marty's comparison to Burt Cooper, because that's a good one. I never even thought of that. But I thought the body work was a great game plan. I think at some point, they should have started going for the head, because he did drop Parker, and it was a legit knockdown, But Parker won the fight. I do think he squeaked it out. I wouldn't have been shocked if Chisora got it. I wouldn't have been shocked if it was a draw. So I enjoyed the fight. The other heavyweight fight last night, Andy Ruiz beat Ruiz-Arreola. Ruiz hit the deck in that fight. I thought that Ruiz is Ruiz. He's got fast hands. He's a likable kid. I mean, who doesn't really like him? He's a likable guy. He looked fantastic in terms of weight and conditioning. I think his glory, his time, his moment in the sun was when he beat Anthony Joshua. Other than that, Ruiz is Ruiz. I thought Arreola, I don't know, was Arreola looking better than normal last night, or was it Ruiz? I thought it was an entertaining fight. I enjoyed every minute of it. It was a little, I agree with Arreola. I don't think he won the fight, but I don't think the scores were the way they were. 118, 109 twice? Come on. I thought the fight was much closer.
No, the scoring was not well at all, just like a few other fights from last night. But I think more or less we were kind of surprised that Ruiz-Arreola had that much in him. For the most part, anybody that I have spoken to leading up to this, or what I've read on social media and in various articles, people thought Ruiz-Arreola was going to get blown out. Ruiz-Arreola's best days are long behind him, but he put up a respectable performance. Andy Ruiz, and again, something I stated last night on our social media feed, that it kind of seems like him losing that weight and trimming down a little bit was a mistake. We've seen that with other fighters. Andy Ruiz, not to the degree where he blew up in between the first and second Anthony Joshua fights, is the guy we want to see in the ring. But we want to see that version from the first Anthony Joshua fight, or that Andy Ruiz Jr. from the Joseph Parker fight, which I actually thought Andy Ruiz Jr. won. So who knows what's going on there with Andy Ruiz Jr. And again, I hate trying to stress this so much to fans. When you suddenly get this big payday and you have all these millions in the bank, you kind of lose a little bit of that desire. And when all you know how to do is one thing, and in the case for most of these guys is boxing, that's what you do because it's just instinctual. Andrew Ruiz is still a young guy in his prime. He's not really sure if he wants to continue on. He doesn't want to continue on. I don't know. It's hard to figure out, but we've seen a better version of Andy Ruiz Jr. I think we'll see a better version of Andy Ruiz Jr. in the future. As for Ruiz-Arreola, I think maybe one more fight against somebody of lower caliber, go out and win and call it a day, because at 40 years old, I think that was the last really great performance we're going to get out of him.
I have two comments to make on your comments with Andy Ruiz, and I don't disagree with you about Ruiz-Arreola, that's for sure. I like Chris, and he's never been a great boxer, but he's been a good fighter, if you know what I mean. But I think two things about Andy Ruiz based on your comments. Number one, I think he has to get used to the weight loss, Dax. Here's a guy that's never been, at least I've never seen him this slim. And I agree with you. Fighters make the mistake. He's not used to it yet. He's got more. You would think he's got more footwork that he could utilize. His hand speed is the same. I think the most important thing for Andy Ruiz Jr. is to learn better defense. He doesn't have any defense, and when you think about it, he gets hit an awful lot. He takes shots. He handles them well, but he gets hit an awful lot. With the weight loss, he should learn, and now he's working with Canelo's trainer. He should learn to move a little bit. Use his hand speed to his advantage and get out of harm's way. I don't mean pull a Mayweather and run across the ring, but at least some head movement. I didn't see it last night, and I wish that he could improve his defense, because being a shorter heavyweight by today's standards, he needs to rely on some defense in addition to his offense.
Well, his offense has always pretty much been his defense, and boxing being a mental sport, more than it is physical a lot of times, the appearance of Andy Ruiz Jr. gets a lot of guys. Even if you see him in action prior to fighting him, and then stepping into the ring with him is another thing. Once you realize, wow, this guy is really fast. He's not out of shape like he appears to be. His cardio was actually very good, outside, of course, that second Joshua fight. But Andrew Ruiz Jr., when he's an undersized heavyweight for the era, and I'm not speaking of weight because, he's overweight, but I'm speaking about his height and the fact that he slimmed down, that more or less takes away from the center of gravity, if you understand what I'm saying. So it makes it easier to knock him down. So Andy Ruiz Jr., what he's going to have to do is, exactly what you said, he's going to have to add a few other wrinkles to his game in terms of a defense, and he's going to have to go back and he's going to have to pick up that excessive work rate with those fast hands that we're so used to that will confuse opponents. That's, the secret for Andy Ruiz Jr., and I think that, his trainer is going to, incorporate that with him, but, this is his first fight under Eddie. I believe it's his first fight under Eddie Reynoso since losing that title to Anthony Joshua, so let's not be too hard on him yet.
On the undercard of Chisora Parker, and I haven't really been, aside from Love and Heather Hardy, I haven't really been following female boxing too much. But Katie Taylor is an exception. She fights. Her style of fighting is the way it should be. It's boxing. She was in tough against Natasha Jones last night. I loved that fight. It was action-packed, like generally the female bouts on a card usually are. What was your thoughts on this fight? I mean, the scores were close. I think they were justifiable. But Jones was landing a much harder shots. It's just that Katie Taylor's more refined. What's your thoughts?
First, female boxing as a whole, look for it from here on out. These women improving. There is still that mindset, Bill, and you being Chevelle Halbeck's manager for so many years should understand. There's still that mindset that these females cannot fight, and it's hard to get them fights. But now that they're starting to get that exposure, is great, and fights like this is only just helping their cause. If this fight would have won a few more rounds, if it would have been 3-minute rounds even, I think Natasha Jonas, who has improved greatly since her stoppage loss to Vivian Obanao 5 fights ago, I thought she won the Terry Harper fight last August when she faced Harper for her super featherweight title that ended in a split draw. Katie Taylor, she's an exceptional boxer. She does need to set the pace. We've seen that with the Delphine Pearsoon fights, and I would love to see this one again. And this is the fight that I stated, out of all the fights last night, the judges got it right. The 96-94, 96-95, 96-95 again. I don't care if it would have went to Natasha Jonas or Katie Taylor. I'd have had no problem with it either way. Yeah,
because Jonas was landing the harder shots. It was a great fight. It's unfortunate that Natasha goes into other people's backyards because the close rounds, they're given to the hometown favorite. But I'm with you. I would love to see a rematch. 2 other fights I wanted to mention on that card. Dimitri Bivol, we talked about him last week. Workman-like win over Craig Richards. I thought it got entertaining when Richards came on in the second part of the fight. Could have been a different fight should he have fought that way from round 1. 115, 113, 115, 114, legit scores. Once again, we got that judge, 118, 110. What the hell fight was he watching? I mean, Bivol, you and I are both fans of Bivol. He's a workman-like, very talented guy, but he seemed like he was thinking about what he was doing tomorrow or something else. He just wasn't into the fight. It's a shame that he doesn't have the right dance partners. I know you weren't really high on it last week when we talked about the potential matchup with Canelo, but dude, I want to see that fight. I want to see Canelo fight Bivol. Canelo's got nothing to prove. Don't get me wrong, but I think Bivol, we would see the best Bivol against Canelo, win, lose, or draw. We would have to, otherwise he would lose the fight. What's your thoughts?
115, 114, 115, 113. I don't know. Are you saying you approve of those scores?
115, 113. 115, 114. I thought the fight got close. Yeah, I thought the fight got close in the second part of the fight. In the beginning,
once again, go check our Facebook tweet, our Twitter feed, because Bill was in bed at 6 o'clock. Where I stated I had no idea that two of Craig Richards' parents were judges in this fight, because it was not a close fight. Watch that fight again today, and you're going to see most of those punches that Craig Richards was using. He looked great pumping out that jab early, but Bivol was catching him on his elbows and his gloves. They weren't landing clean. Bivol, like Golovkin, because of their facial makeup and them high cheekbones, they a lot of times look as though they've taken more damage than what they actually have. Bivol, the problem with him is early on he had developed this reputation as a puncher, when Bivol is really, he's a master boxer. Joe Smith Jr., who's now a WBO champion, so happy for him, he said it best after his fight with Bivol, that you find yourself hesitant to open up and let your hands go, because when you do, you're getting hit from every angle. There's very few fighters that I can say over the last years that you have heard that said about. Joshua Clottey, after his fight with Manny Pacquiao, with prime Manny Pacquiao, had said the same thing. He was afraid to open up, because once you open up, you start getting hit on every angle. Now, Bivol last night, coming in off an 18-month layoff, you couldn't expect him to look at his best, but considering that time out of the ring, his reflexes were there. He didn't take too many punches. He had, generally outboxed Richards, who is not a bad fighter, but this was just like a level 3, 4, 5 levels up from what he's used to. Dmitry Bivol, I think it's unfair that some of the criticism he gets due to the fact people expect him to be a more action fighter. One of the dumbest one of the dumbest comments I heard all year was that announcer saying something to the effect of Dmitry Bivol doesn't seem concerned with having highlight reel moments. He's happy just to win. A lot of all-time greats, whether or not you want to go to a Willie Pep, whether you want to say a Floyd Mayweather, there's a million comparisons that you can use, have become all-time greats by boxing. This is a sport. It's an art, Bill. You say it yourself all the time. There's nothing about there that says hit and be hit. It's about hit and don't get hit. And Dmitry Bivol is fantastic at that.
I have you know that I stayed up and watched that fight because it started at 1 o'clock, okay? So I was not in bed. And I just thought that Richards was scoring at the second part of the fight. That's all. I didn't say that he won. And I didn't say that he was robbed or anything like that, but so I wasn't in my feety pajamas, much to your chagrin.
Just to interject on that, because of that card, Steve Gray, who was also the referee for the Chisora and Parker fight, and he was one of the judges who had it that close. That guy should not be around professional boxing. He should not be a referee. The way he ignored those behind the head shots that both Derek Chisora and Joseph Parker were landing in that fight. It's dangerous enough for any headshot, but when heavyweights are doing it on a constant, the risk of injury just raises. Those fights don't always show immediate effects. In fact, they rarely do. It's not until later, back inside the dressing room, or even a few hours back at the hotel, does that fighter start having a headache all of a sudden, not feeling right, an abnormal headache, not from being punched in the head and punched in the face repeatedly. They end up at the ER and, the outcome is rarely positive. So I don't understand how, they have somebody like that around the sport, involved in the sport, not only giving out bad decisions, which, is expected, but allowing guys to be placed into danger like that. That's something that really bothers me in the sport.
I got news for you. I think a point should have been deducted from Chisora at least by the third round against Parker behind the headshots. He finally got warned and it slowed down, but then Parker started doing a couple to Chisora, I guess as in retaliation, but it was.
And I'm not even suggesting they were intentional, Bill. I'm just saying they were happening, and he should have done something about it.
Yeah, no, I know. Finally, one last point. Vasily Lara is now a WBA middleweight title. How many titles? I lost count. I only have 10 fingers and 10 toes. The WBA's got to have, a gazillion different titles? I mean, and that's why I was on my rant about your boy, Trevor Bryan. Yeah, he's a WBA title holder, but look at who they get to fight for these belts. Now, Chris Eubank Jr. against Morrison, I'm okay with that. I mean, he was out for a while. I was scratching my head a little bit about when he had Morrison in some trouble and he backed off, a la Roy Jones Jr., who's now in his corner. I like Eubank Jr. I know he's gunning for Triple G. What was your thoughts first of the fight?
Well, again, how was that fight made is number one. LaManna loses 2 in a row. He loses Dakota and Mendoza. Then he fights a couple journeymen in Mexico, and all of a sudden he's in there, even for a secondary title. I don't understand how that could have possibly happened. Now, as far as how that could be justified, as far as Vasily Lara, he moved to middleweight for what reasons, I'm unsure. Can he not make 154 anymore? Or is he hoping maybe for a big fight with Triple G or even Canelo? Both fights he has been asking for years. Lara has never been beat cleanly. You know, if you go back and you remember, you know, the Paul Williams fight by majority decision was so bad that judges were suspended. Jarrett Hurd, when Hurd was undefeated, unified junior middleweight champion. That was, I believe, a majority decision or a split decision. You know, Lara has never been beaten cleanly. His one draw, I think, was a majority or a split draw. This is a guy who, very rarely can you say this, has earned himself the right to have a big fight, a cash-out fight. You know, he's put in the work. He has been avoided by a lot of fighters over the years. As far as LaManna, you know, going in there as that opponent really takes away from anybody even wanting to entertain the idea of Lara going in there against one of the other top middleweights. You know, as for Trevor Bryan, let me just address that, you know, for not just me personally, just, you know, for a lot of young fighters. This is a kid who, you know, I did not train personally. You know, I was just involved in the gym, you know, where Vince Kittle was training him, bringing him out to the Olympics. You know, I worked with him a few times, you know, doing mitts and such things. But in boxing, we know that there are vultures. We know this. And what happened was Stacey McKinley was coming around the country looking for guys to bring over to Don King. And this was just before or as Don King was settling down. That's how Amir Imam and Trevor Bryan both ended up in contracts with Don King. And once they signed those contracts, Don King more or less just stopped promoting. I think since they've been signed with him, he might have promoted one or two cards that we can speak of. If you remember John from LDL TV, how happy he was when Stavern had won that WBC title. So this way he was hoping he was going to be able to resume his position with Don King Promotions again. So, you know, Trevor Bryan, it's not his fault that he was caught out into that contract. He didn't have anybody to advise him correctly and let him know who he should or should not sign with. He didn't have anybody going over the contracts. All he was kind of lured in like a lot of young fighters by the name and the promises that, you know, promoters give. And Don King is a master at that. And that if it was not for that, Trevor Bryan's career, I promise you, would have been further along than it is now.
I'm just saying, nothing against Bryan, but the WBA, first of all, to fight for the vacant heavyweight title against Stavern, I just went through the history of Stavern. How does he even get the shot? And Trevor Bryan, regardless of how the
he got that shot because Stavern is another guy under Don King.
No, I know why. I'm just saying it's a joke. It's a joke because, you know, he says that he's a champion and he's got a belt. The WBA is the joke here. That's my point. But anyway,
absolutely, WBA is the joke.
Yeah.
You know, just on two more things. One, Sebastian Fundora. What do you think? What did you think of him last night?
I didn't see the fight. I saw he stopped his opponent. I like the kid. He's too tall to me. He needs more weight on him. I don't know if he can maintain this weight class. He's going to be a tough out.
Yeah, yes, 6'5", an 80-inch reach at 154 pounds.
I know.
He has wins over 6 or 7 undefeated opponents. He has to be taken serious.
No
and what about the Felix Verdejo incident?
I'm going to get to that a little bit later, but interesting stuff on that one. Doesn't look good for him. You know, he's married. He's got a Gumati on the side that ends up getting pregnant with his kid, and she disappears. Last known sight was at his house. It's not looking good, bro.
No, it's kind of shocking. You know, it comes across last night that, you know, he goes from person of interest to genuine suspect, and the last I heard, he was actually picked up by the police again. They got somebody,
another person apparently is cooperating. The term they use is cooperating with the police, and that's why he's a suspect now. But you know, people do stupid things when they're in panic mode, Dax. You know, it's unfortunate. Hey, sorry for the delay today. Thanks to Microsoft, we had them to decide to do an update. And you're right. When I did fall asleep last night, I should have hit the enter key like you did, and it would.
No, I didn't. That's the thing. I didn't hit it. I hit the power off, and all of a sudden, it's wouldn't let the computer turn off because of the updates. You know, I wasn't just gonna sit there and you know, override it and turn it off, or else what would have happened was exactly what happened to you today.
Exactly.
For an hour.
No, I left it on, and I didn't basically shut it off. If I would have shut it off, it would have did the update, But anyway, Dax, I appreciate it. Keep up the good work with the website. Next week we got a fight that we'll be talking about: Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders. It'll be a good one. So we got a good show scheduled for next week.
Yep, and I'll get that those videos back out to you this week. I've been delayed a little bit. I got a detached ligament in my arm, so that's kind of held me back for a couple days. But got some good stuff coming up over there.
Sounds good. I'll get them up as soon as I get them.
All right, everybody, enjoy your day.
Take care. That's Dax Khan. Check him out on the website BillyCBoxing.com, and he's the guy that keeps that going. Yeah, it's unfortunate about the Verdejo situation. I will be discussing that a little bit later. I got an email that actually brought me up to speed on that. So that's why we will be doing that. Now, I got my man Alex Papali scheduled to come up here in a sec. But remember, Alex's segment, especially since he was the guy who we can't use the word edited, but he proofread my book. So get yourself a copy of this book right now. Tom Molyneux from Bondage, Best Man on the Planet is available right now where all good books are sold. Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Yeah, I wrote it a couple of years ago, but it's a good read, and we have been moving some copies lately, more than normal. So I think, hey, after 4 years, maybe it's finally, maybe people saying, hey, we should read this book. You should. If you want a signed copy, drop me an email, Billy@TalkinBoxing, TalkinBoxing.com. Joining me right now, the man, the myth, the legend, well, sort of, Alex Papali. What's up, brother? You never know what I'm going to say, do you?
Good morning, Billy C. How are you?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. First and foremost, got some fights. Thoughts on the Parker-Chisora fight?
First, just overall, yesterday was crazy because it really was boxing from 1 in the afternoon till just about 1 in the morning. I enjoyed it, quite honestly.
Let me ask you this. How many outcomes weren't what you knew they were going to be?
That's a good question.
None.
Probably not too many. No. Well, there was the one upset.
But did you really know those guys?
Well, one of them, yeah. What's his name? Thomason there.
The one who lost?
Right, the one who lost. because that was the big. I think I thought Ruiz-Arreola would have been a little more sustained action. I don't think it was close, and I don't think we need to see a rematch. I thought Parker-Chisora was a lot more entertaining, and I thought Parker won that. That could have been a little closer. That maybe a little closer than on the scorecards. I could certainly see him being, I don't know, the level of resentment from both Chisora and Arreola was a little out of whack. They both know what they are.
Yeah, but Chisora's fight was close on the scorecards. It was a split decision, and yeah. The thing about him though, Alex, was that in the beginning of that fight, now don't get me wrong, I like Parker. As a matter of fact, I think he's improved. I saw an improved version of Parker against Chisora. But the thing that bothered me about that fight was the fact that it doesn't appear that judges give credit for the body work. Those body shots, he wasn't just going through the motions, going to the body. He was landing them on the sides and the rib cage. I mean, he didn't hold back, and it was a sustained body attack that he maybe was implementing too long, but obviously he wasn't getting the points, because Parker would land 1 or 2 shots. His jab was beautiful, followed up with a shot or two, and then clinched and took the body work that were landing. So I don't know, man.
Yeah, that is, I think one of the perpetual arguments of the sport is, and I think especially in prize fighting, you've got to find a happy medium. But I do think that some judges do tend to, favor head punches. I do think that I thought that Chisora was coming, even though he was the one making the fight. In the fact that he was pushing the action, that's what he was there for. I wasn't surprised that Parker was a lot more fun to watch than he usually is. Why? Because he had a guy pressing the action, so he could counter him. And I thought he rose to the level of that after a shaky start. I thought it was very sloppy, but that's what made it enjoyable, especially for heavyweights. And I think that's the thing about Chisora. And I felt the judges got it right in that they did not give him over credit him for a lot of punches that are cuffing shots. And yes, he's pushing the action and throwing more punches, but I don't think it's effective. So to me, but again, I'm watching from TV. I'm not there. I'm tweeting. I don't have the same focus as a judge who's right there. So a lot of those rounds could have been closer. But I do think that that's one of the things that tends to happen a lot with aggressive fighters, especially in the heavyweight division, is sometimes we mistake aggression for damage, and especially in a fight where one guy gets off the deck. And if you think about it, both heavyweights who won yesterday got off the deck, both Parker and Ruiz. And I think when you have a lot of people who are not as seasoned in watching the sport, if one guy was knocked down, well, it's hard to overcome that. Right.
In the Ruiz-Arreola fight, very entertaining. I enjoyed seeing Ruiz in good shape. Dax and I talked about it. I think the guy's not used to this weight. I think he needs to get used to it. I don't know if I agree with those scores. I mean, I thought the fight was closer. I still think Ruiz won despite being dropped. But 118, 109 twice. I mean, that seems like Arreola didn't get anything by those two judges, and the other 117, 110. What's your thoughts on Ruiz? His improvement, in my opinion, has to be defense oriented.
I thought he looked good. And I thought, in a way, one of the things that I was just thinking while you and Dax were talking was, in a way, yesterday was kind of like searching for Jerry Quarry. Derek Chisora and Chris Arreola are not Jerry Quarry. I think the closest one is Andy Ruiz, because if you think about it, and I know there's probably a lot of old timers who are pulling their hair out for me saying that, but hold on a second, because if you think about it, if Jerry Quarry were around today, he would have certainly won a title.
No doubt, no doubt.
Andy Ruiz has won a title. Andy Ruiz is one of the top 3 or 4 heavyweights in the world. The thing is that, and I do think that he did show improvement yesterday, because I thought that fight was close, or at least entertaining the first 4 rounds. But then, to me, Ruiz took over, and I hear what you're saying, Bill, that maybe the score, the 118, 109 card sounds out of whack, but how many more rounds would you have given Arreola? For me, the most I gave him 3. Maybe there was one more that was close. So if you give him 3 with the knockdown, what's that?
4 rounds.
So 4 points. So 4 points.
Right. So if you gave him 4 rounds and then the knockdown, I'm not saying Ruiz doesn't win the fight, but I thought it was closer. That's all, by score. You know, when you're scoring a fight, you know,
because I think the 118, 109, that does suggest, because when you add the extra point for the knockdown, it does sound like, well, they only gave him one round.
Right. That's the round they gave him.
Yeah.
You know, and he in the early part of the fight, he was landing the shots. Okay,
the first 3 rounds, I think you could argue were his.
Yeah, you know, and then as the fight went on, after the 6th round, you know, it was all Ruiz, and you know, Ruiz-Arreola, like he usually does, ran out of gas a little bit using the old face block, and you know, Ruiz, you know, stockpiling points. The thing was that he didn't drop Arreola, although he had him hurt that one round, even though Arreola shook his head and said he didn't. We all know what that means. But anyway, I was glad to see the new and improved Ruiz. I hope he continues to improve. Like I said, I think he needs some work on defense. I want to stay with the heavyweights here and, you know, follow the bouncing ball with the Tyson Fury and Anthony Joshua fight. A couple weeks back, Eddie Hearn said this fight is bigger than the Olympics, and he wasn't worried. Then a week or so after that, it looks like they got a site fee, $150 million site fee from the Middle East. Everything looked good. Zero holdup was what Eddie Hearn was quoted as saying. And then earlier this week, it comes out by the infamous Bob Arum, who says this fight's dead in the water. Last night, Eddie Hearn said the fight is nowhere near dead in the water, and once again said we should have an official announcement within 10 days. What's your thoughts on this? This is the fight we want to see. Is this typical Bob Arum trying to speed up the process? There are a lot of mouths you got to feed here. You have Bob Arum and Warren as Tyson Fury's promoters. You got, of course, Eddie Hearn. Yet now you have the team over in the Middle East who's, you know, they're arguing over TV rights and everything else. Then you have the TV rights over here. Bob Arum has a different network that he works with, ESPN versus Eddie Hearn with DAZN. I mean, there's a lot of things that have to be worked out. It doesn't surprise me that it's going to take a little time to dot all the I's and cross all the T's. But at the end of the day, is somebody going to hold their breath too long and we lose this fight?
That's what I worry, is that that maybe in all the posturing and all the legal wrangling that you know, the fight ends up getting you know, not happening. At least that so far, that's where we're at. But I was encouraged by what you know, what Eddie Hearn said yesterday. I think it is mildly entertaining. As much as you know, I'm a boxing fan, so I want to see guys fight. This most recent back and forth between the two, Arum and Hearn, is kind of entertaining because you can't help but try to, at least I can't, try to pick away at the sort of the psychology behind them, and also the philosophies. If you watched Eddie Hearn's interview yesterday, it was full of hope. Whereas Arum was like, it was the opposite. It was full of despair.
Not only that, but that's Bob Arum. He says, I can't see this fight happening before 2022. And it looks like they're both going to be fighting different opponents first. I mean, when I heard that, and that was documented, you know, when I see stuff reported on ESPN, I refer to it as reputable. That's classic Bob Arum. And Bob Arum would hold the fight off. In his mind, he's marinating it. I don't think the fight can get any bigger than it is right now. And, you know, with all of this other BS that's going on with the sport, in my opinion, the sport is being mocked by Floyd Mayweather, you know, fighting this Paul the last week. The other Paul fighting an MMA guy. Now you got a TikToker against a YouTuber. I mean, it's a joke. Snoop Dogg is the most entertaining guy up on a desk in boxing. You have some rap music going on. I mean, It's not the same. We have our historians that have passed, the Burt Sugars are rolling in their graves right now. These great fighters that gave so much to this sport, in the ring, in preparation for fights outside of the ring. With the shenanigans that are going on. I mean, think about this, Alex. There was generations, at least 2 full generations, maybe 3, that despised Muhammad Ali because of his antics, because of the shenanigans he pulled. And today, as much as they were, outrageous back then, today nobody would even get upset with some of the stuff that goes on. It's a joke. What's your thoughts?
Well, and I think that's sort of the nature of our world, in the sense that there's a lot of illusions that people can buy into, I think right now the idea that Deontay Wilder's chances and the whole only hope that sort of keeps his career alive in a lot of at least his most supportive fans, is the idea that the costume was the downfall against Tyson Fury. And
do people really believe that?
Well, I think there probably are. I think there are some, and I think that's if that third fight, if we have to settle for that instead of Anthony Joshua for Tyson Fury's next fight. I think that you wait and see how much that becomes part of the narrative.
Well, let me ask you this,
because I think that's one of the things that I love about our sport, is that there is a sort of wild west quality to it. It is there is a chaos to it. I was over a friend's watching some of the NFL draft the other day. And I was really struck because they would go, there's just such a stale corporate effort to try to make it look a certain way. And like every time they would show the different team rooms where all the bigwigs were making the decisions, they would say, oh, everybody in there is fully vaccinated. Like, who cares, But they're trying to portray this corporate image, so they want to make sure that they're putting forward this right thing. Well, look at the difference with our sport. They were showing the dressing rooms, everybody's hugging each other, and then the thing that cracked me up was the debate that Brian Kenny, the commentators, are having about the arm apparatus that one of the fighters there in the swing bout on the after Lara laid waste to LaManna, nobody knew, and it's like nobody knew what that all that tape was. It's like this is the sport you're covering. No one can explain why he's wearing what he's wearing.
It's a joke
in the ring, So I mean, I think that's the thing that. In terms of, but I do hope that we do see it happen next, Fury Joshua, instead of Fury versus Wilder. Because
let me just ask you this: have you heard anything about Wilder? Last thing I heard about Wilder, his former trainer that he blamed it on, basically said he's a nutcase, and I haven't heard another thing since.
There was video this week of him hitting the mitts.
Ooh! So he's training hard.
So he's training.
Yeah.
But I think that was the thing, and if you permit me to go back to that Jerry Quarry allusion last, was one of the things they were talking about was, possibly Andy Ruiz fighting Arreola again, which I would not want to see, and what's the point? Or Wilder, or Luis Ortiz. And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Luis Ortiz or Arreola versus Ruiz. And to me, that's one of the problems of the sport, because of this sort of intramural nature, where it's everybody stays within their own promoter's availability of opponents. That's what we'll end up seeing, and that's where it's very different. Because if it was Jerry Quarry, He would be. I want the winner of Fury Joshua.
Well, Trevor Bryant says he wants all those guys too, and he's, just not there. I think Mike Tyson should fight Trevor Bryant because Mike Tyson at 50-some-odd years old beats Trevor Bryant right now and can win the title again, even though it's a WBA title. And all the references to COVID's become so 2020 now. COVID's 2020. We're in 2021 now. Now there's debate over vaccinations. The people that are not getting it. What's that?
Are you vaccinated?
You know something? Let me tell you. Funny you should ask. I was ready to go, and I preferred. I'm not. I don't like the whole procedure of the vaccination. First of all, I don't like all the hoopla around COVID. COVID is a serious, contagious virus that really makes problems for people with underlying conditions and older people. But it was blown out of proportion. People are scared to death. Fights are breaking out if you have a mask or don't have a mask on. All of this stuff. The CDC, they're saying, you don't need to wear a mask outside. Hello? If you're on your property by yourself and you're wearing a mask, you got problems. And for all you bastards out there that are driving in your car and you're sitting in your friggin' car alone and you got a mask on, you got a fucking problem. Because there are problems out there with people and the fear factor, okay? And just to finish my story, I was all signed up to get the Johnson & Johnson one. And when I was doing my little research, I felt that the Johnson & Johnson research protocol was more standard in our vaccination process over the last 100 years. What they did, blah, blah, blah. I was all ready to get it. Something told me not to. I canceled the appointment at the last minute. And 2 days later, they, took it off the shelves, so to speak. I'm sure it's going to come back. And when and if the government forces us to get it, then I would prefer that one. But to suggest that you have to have your card to get on a plane or to go and be in an outdoor park and be able to prove that you're vaccinated. In case people haven't noticed, our rights are being extremely violated, and we are losing them right by right. Now, with that said, if it was the plague, and I stepped out my porch and took a breath and dropped dead, I'd be the last guy to leave my house, okay? But come on, let's be real. All I say is COVID, that's so 2020, man. Well, that was, man, you struck a nerve, huh? You didn't know
I guess so.
You didn't know that was going to happen.
No.
But I want to talk to you about three more things. We're all whacked out with the time, so I'm going to save the one that you're going to enjoy the most for last. But Vasily Lomanchenko, I guess, is scheduled to fight Nakatani on June 26th. What's your thoughts of Lomachenko coming back? He did have an injury after his loss, or had separated his shoulder or whatever he did in that fight. I still think he's one of the best, if not the best, pound-for-pound fighter out there. What's your thoughts about him fighting Nakatani?
I'm okay with that fight. I mean, I think that he's still one of the best at lightweight. He's not. I would like to see a rematch with Lopez.
I think Lopez is too big. I think we forced Lomachenko to move up. At least two. He moved up he's three weight classes since he started, but he's at least two above what he should be, in my opinion. So I don't know. I think Lopez is just too big for him. I just don't think, even though he can land punches on Lopez, I'm not so sure he can hurt him, and I think Lopez hurts him every time he lands. So I don't know.
It could be, but I think that, to me, the what makes grounds for a rematch is if you see something that definitely you didn't see, that you think, well, what would happen if I guess in this case, it was so obvious Lomachenko waited too long to start boxing. He just coasted those early rounds. So I think if they were to fight a rematch, if he were to step up the activity, that might be a whole different fight.
See, you know what? I don't mean to interrupt you, but that's what's happened in our world today. We analyze data so much, and we all know that his father, who was his trainer, is a genius when it comes to boxing. I think you just made a great point, and I think that they analyzed the data too much, and that data meaning that Teofimo Lopez was known for running out of gas at the second part of the fight, and I think they were banking on that. And credit to Team Lopez, he was prepared to go 12 rounds. And you're right that the game plan failed them.
Yeah, and I think that's, to me, that's one of the things why, where in terms of the real adolescent male fantasy aspect of boxing for me, that it's just like comic books, because that's what happens when great superheroes run into somebody. They might get their ass kicked the first time because, man, I just didn't know. I didn't expect this, you know. But
tune in next week to see how our hero can get out of what looks like he will never get out of.
See, tune in next week where Lomachenko figures out he has to box the first 6 rounds of a fight.
Exactly.
So I think that, to me, that's one of those ingredients where that's a rematch that's worth fighting, worth having, because it was a glaring problem with his strategy the first time, was he just waited so long. And that would be just like if Hagler and Leonard were to fight a second time, what would be the two things? One, Hagler start fighting sooner, and two, come out southpaw. So those are the kind of things that, to me, a rematch, that's what you want to see. That there's ingredients, something you didn't see the first time that, well, let's see if he or she could do it this time.
Well, with Lomachenko's background in ballet or whatever, I think the game plan for the first 6 rounds was, I just want to dance. You know. But anyway, the other thing I wanted to ask you is Demetrius Andrade. I know you have a soft spot for him, 30-0. He's, you know, after his fight, I was saying who I wanted him to fight, and he comes out. And it was the middle of April 19th, and he comes out and he says the same thing we were talking about. He says, I want to fight Charlo or Murata or Triple G. And we were talking about that right after that fight, that he needs to, you know, everybody's talking Triple G. I think Triple G's got better fights than him. Chris Eubank Jr. is one of them. Maybe like Dax suggested, maybe Ursulandi Lara is another decent fight that could get a good payday. But Andrade, I like the Charlo fight or Murata. What's your thoughts?
I don't actually. I kind of think that he's banking on a Golovkin because I think he is sort of in a similar position as Andy Ruiz, that he's the third guy at the top. And he needs a Charlo or a Golovkin to stay relevant. So because he's not, you know, he's not an A side. Let's be honest. He thinks he is, but and I think the Golovkin fight would be fun because I think just like what you had with Chisora and Parker. Some guys need the right opponent to make their style that might not be that fun to watch more appealing. And I think Golovkin would press the action, which would make Andrade fight, which would make it more fun.
I just think Charlo. I want to see the Charlo brothers fight somebody, you know, and I just think that it's an evenly matched fight, Demetrius against Charlo. I just do. That's the fight I would like to see. And the winner catapult to a big money fight, I guess.
Well, but keep in mind though, the thing with Golovkin, he's getting old, and the more he sits on a shelf,
it's the worst thing for him.
Yeah, that doesn't help. So I don't know. I mean, I think Eubank Jr., it was so clear he wanted rounds yesterday. And it was like, because he backed off.
I hated that. I thought, and you know what? Fighters shouldn't do that, because I've seen it where a fighter, we just want to get rounds, and you let a guy off the hook. Next thing you know, you're going, I should have finished him. Now I got stopped. Yeah. He caught me with that lucky shot, and his opponent was in decent shape. I mean, that's Roy Jones, man. That's Roy Jones' mentality 100%. But if it works, it works.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, boy, Eubank Jr. is doing a Roy Jones Jr.
100%. 100%. So I get this email from my man in Elias from Wisconsin, who I'm glad that he finally has given us some emails. He was a regular contributor to my mailbag, but he writes, Verdejo being investigated in Puerto Rico for the disappearance of Keisha Rodriguez, his mistress and 1 month pregnant at the time of his disappearance. I look at that and I know this is, up your alley because you like interesting
morbidity.
Like this. Yeah. And now it's even, he was a person of interest last week. Now, as of last night, he's a suspect. Apparently, an accomplice of this murder, so to speak, is already with the police and is cooperating, according to multiple reports. Felix Verdejo, it's not looking good. It was reported that the woman who is missing was last seen at Verdejo's home, and she had revealed to him that she was pregnant with his kid. He is married, and I could see him going into panic. Klumso, what do you think of this?
Yeah, it sure doesn't sound good. And it's very tragic for the woman who lost her life. Just awful. I don't know. I mean, I do think that it's like you said. I think that it looks like they're going to be picking up. If they didn't pick him up last night, because a lot of the tweets I was seeing, police were at his house or something. So I don't know if they picked him up or not. But yeah, it's disturbing, and his career was already sort of on the decline, and now to think that he might have been involved in something horrendous like this, just yikes, awful. But I do think that I that's one of the things that, of course, we've seen this kind of thing, and you can't help but wonder the link of head trauma to violence. But that would be wrong to sort of launch into that argument, because there's so many people in our sport who do not do anything like that. So it's sort of it's just unfortunate. I mean, I had just been talking with somebody about a WWE wrestler who had killed his family and then himself, and that was one of those things where you wonder, was that the result of concussions and brain damage?
Well, some of these athletes that get into these triangles, they should follow one of two rules. Either keep the dick in their pants or wrap that rascal. I mean, am I being too blunt here? It doesn't boil down to that.
Yeah, it's pretty horrible no matter what, if that's why he did it, that's just an awful thing. Jeez.
Sorry to lay that philosophy on you, but okay, before we let you go, next week I'm looking forward to our Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders post-fight show. What's your thoughts on this fight? I watched. I enjoyed. I loved the daytime boxing. I loved it. I loved that, man. And I was watching so much so that I was even watching some of the bullshit that they throw on in between fights. But they were trying to make a case for how Billy Joe Saunders actually has a chance in this fight. I don't see it, Alex. I know Billy Joe is a slick fighter. I know he can box. I think Canelo has just elevated himself to another level. I mean, he has proven it. I know I was critical of Canelo for a while. I didn't like the ducking of the Triple G, which I clearly thought it was. The rematch, the third fight, should have happened immediately. It didn't. But I've gotten to see Canelo do a lot of great things. You can't say he's cherry-picked like Mayweather did throughout his career. I think at the end of the day, he's going to finish higher on the all-time great list, pound for pound, than Floyd ever will. I only say that because Canelo lost to Floyd, and he learned a lot from that fight. And credit to Floyd for fighting him when he did, because he knew. I honestly believe that Floyd is smart enough to know a talent when he sees it. I think that he just said to himself, let me make some money, let me get this kid now, because in another couple of years he's going to be impossible to beat. And I think that Canelo is almost at that point now, and I don't see this fight being competitive unless Canelo wants to go a couple of rounds himself.
I think that I do think Billy Joe Saunders is deserving in the sense that he is one of the top 168 pounders. I do think Caleb Plant is probably the guy who's the best guy who's not named Canelo Alvarez at 168. So that's the fight I'd like to see if Canelo's going to stay here at this division. Because to be honest, I'd still like to see another Triple G fight. I think that's unfinished business.
With Canelo?
Canelo Golovkin. Yeah, I'd like to still see that fight again.
I don't know. I think that's worn out. At this point, it's too Canelo. I don't think Triple G has a chance with Canelo now. I think Canelo. I honestly got to give Canelo credit. I mean, what I saw him do to Kovalev, he's a fighter that he's fought bigger guys. He's moved up and down in weight. He's a warrior. He really is.
Yeah. Well, and I do think that he is going to beat Billy Joe Saunders. I have a feeling the question to me is can he walk him down and stop him? I have a feeling he will, and it'll likely be a body shot. That I think Saunders' best way to win is just to give him lots and lots of movement. But Canelo's really good at cutting off the ring.
I was just going to say, he cuts the ring off.
So it's going to be a very, very, very difficult task. I wish I was going to be there in person because Canelo is, as much as yesterday was a huge boxing day, next Saturday is going to be bigger when you think about the star power because Canelo is must-see TV.
I think, what we both said, as a matter of factly, how fantastic Canelo cuts the ring off. I think you got to give Floyd Mayweather credit for that. And the fight against Floyd. This is the problem with a lot of young fighters today, Alex. They don't challenge themselves. They fight, basically to get wins and look good on paper. And then when they get in a fight, they don't learn from those fights. They don't get a loss to regroup and come back because the media, the fan base, whatever, devalues them when they lose. And you take a look at Canelo, he fights Floyd Mayweather, a pound-for-pound top fighter, a guy known for his defensive skill, and, he chased him around the ring. And he learned, hey, listen, when you fight a guy with movement and brains like Floyd has, ring smarts. I should correct myself. You know, the learning.
That took me a second.
Yeah, the learning aspect of it. Stop, Alex. You know, you're painting the wrong picture. All right. Anyway, Canelo learned from fighting Floyd. All right. I mean, it is what it is. You know.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that's one of the things that makes him an awesome fighter. And if he's able to do that in the rest of his life, that makes him an awesome person. Because think about it, that's one of those, you know, why do we fall? So we could learn to pick ourselves back up. Buddha said that, and so did Batman's father. So yeah, I think Canelo knows that, and I think that's one of the things that you learn from losing. I'm sure he went back and watched that tape. I wouldn't be surprised if one of the tapes he watches the most is his loss to Mayweather.
I think he learned the most in that fight.
Yeah,
I think he, you know, he made a ton of money, and he learned from that fight, and never was the same, to his credit. You know, and you know, I guess you got to give some credit to Floyd too. You know.
Yeah. So in other words, I think you're going to be buying the Logan Paul Floyd Mayweather fight.
Absolutely not. And you know what? I hope. I know.
That would be a masterclass, Billy C.
I know that no one that typically watches or listens to this show will be buying that. I'm interested to see how many idiots do buy it. You know, and that is Floyd. You know, the one thing, I don't know if you know this, but I never really liked Floyd Mayweather. But the one thing I do respect of him, he knows how to make money. And let me tell you something about Floyd. Although I've never met him in person, he's laughing his way all the way. He is sitting there saying, these idiots are going to pay for this pay-per-view. And, you know, that's what pisses me off. Boxing has become a joke. TikToker against a YouTuber being billed as a boxing match on a Snoop show? I mean, come on.
To me, that it's a sideshow. To me, there's room enough. That's what I love about our sport, is I think there's enough room for that. Because that to me doesn't have anything to do with boxing. Yesterday was boxing, and there wasn't a YouTuber or TikToker among them. You know, I think the people who love this sport know that, and even if they bought it, you know, that's the thing. The mainstream, as much as they don't follow boxing and don't give it attention, they really are fascinated by it, because it's just strange. These celebrity boxing things are so freaking popular. It is, and you know, I think it's because fighting is popular. Look at last night. There were so many fights in the stands at that Ruiz-Arreola fight. Part of it, I think, is people just dying. I don't know. Maybe they are tired of being separate from each other. They're so overwhelmed by being close together. They got to put their hands on each other.
Don't think that this COVID's not affecting us like that.
It's crazy.
It's driving people nuts.
But if you look in that audience, there are people who are fascinated by the fights when they're watching a fight. You know, so I mean, it's like everybody loves fighting. So
what about the other day? I saw clips. There was some kind of fast food restaurant. Somebody got into an argument because someone had a mask on or someone didn't have a mask. Next thing you know, Chads are flying. They have it all on video. I mean, come on. You know, people are losing their minds. But anyway.
I gotta send you one of a guy who's gassing up his car. It must be late at night, and these people pull up in a van too. They must be about to carjack him. And it's like one of those Sun Tzu moments, you know, the art of war, because it's like, use your environment, and he pulls the nozzle out of the gas, out of the car gas tank, and douses them all with gasoline, and they go fleeing. He turns that situation around in a half second.
and then you know, you see them all throwing their cigarettes away, right? No, but
if anyone had a cigarette lit inside that van, it would have exploded.
Yeah, well, people are losing their minds, you know. But anyway, Hey, I appreciate it, Alex. Sorry for the delay today. Look forward to your thoughts next week, brother.
All right, Billy C. Take care.
All right, that's my main man, Alex Papali, giving us his thoughts and his jokes. He jokes to that, Alex, But anyway. All right, I got a couple of emails I want to read. And this first one's from my man, Alex T. He says, I'll tell you what would be interesting. Well, actually, it's a two-part thing. He says, hey, Billy C., thanks for not mentioning the Thriller card in your show. I don't even want you to read this email. I don't get why there's so much attention, and I don't want to give any more. It reminds me of Andy Kaufman when he used to challenge women in wrestling. I wrote back and told Alex, oh, yes, I am going to read this. It is a joke, and we just talked about that. And, the Mayweather against his brother is a joke. No discredit to Floyd because he's cashing the checks, but I don't know who would watch it. He says, I tell you what would be interesting, though. I know these punch stat numbers are crap. I know you do, too. He's meaning myself, which I do. He says, I was watching a Showtime fight on Saturday, and one guy was clearly landing punches, and the punch stat number wasn't moving. Maybe the guy who was supposed to be pressing a button got up to get a beer. It would be interesting to ask your audience for all of us to pick a round from one fight where the punch stat was used and have you, Alex, and Dax, and everyone else watch that round and count the punches. Let's just say round 7 of the Joe Smith-Vlasov fight, for example. Everyone watched the seventh round twice. First time you watch it, count the punches landed for Smith, then watch it and count the punches landed for Vlasov, and then compare notes. I guarantee you, you will have numbers all over the place. Would be interesting conversation. It would be an interesting conversation topic. I hate when these numbers are used by announcers to justify their opinion on who's winning a fight. The real judges don't see them. I thought Vlasov outlanded Joe Smith. Punch stats tell me I'm wrong. Thanks for the email, Alex. You guys have heard me complaining about the punch stats for a long, long time. It's subjective. And what I mean by that, the truth of the matter is you have two guys ringside with a laptop and they're recording punches, which they are subjectively saying if they landed cleanly or not. The truth of the matter is you and me and a third guy or girl could be watching a fight, and I could say that punch landed. You could say it grazed him, and the third person could say it was blocked. And we're all talking about the same punch. It's subjective. I think that if the only way the punch stats could be really statistical is if they are doing it frame by frame, and they do it after the fight. It would take forever, but you would get true stats. Right now we're getting subjective stats, and we're treating it like it's data that should not be argued or questioned. Jim Lampley ended up basically becoming a laughingstock as a boxing announcer because he called his fights based on the punch stats that were being given to him. And a punch stat really is only good for a conversation piece, in my opinion. You could land 10 punches, and I land one, and the one I land knocks you out. Deontay Wilder is a great example. Deontay Wilder, power puncher. You could be jabbing the shit out of him all night long, and then he lands one punch, and you wake up the next day saying, well, did I win? So, yes, punch stats, the way they're being done now, useless as tits on a bowl. This is from my man Rick. He says, hey, Billy C., glad to hear you back on the air. I'm glad to hear Sal is doing well. Have not had a chance to speak to Sal. We're trying to get him back to come on the show. He is doing very well from the last time I spoke to him. He says, I heard you bring up the 2-fight deal with Joshua and Fury, and there's a trend this is a trend that's always annoyed me. I understand a champion wanting a rematch clause when putting his belt on a line, but to already be planning a second fight before the first one even happens seems counterproductive to me. For starters, what if the first fight sucks? Now we have to sit through another one just because it was part of the deal. Even if the fight is good, committing to an immediate rematch puts the rest of the division on hold for the sake of watching two fighters we've already seen go at it. I'm actually not a fan of immediate rematches in general unless that fight ended with some kind of controversy. Marquez and Pacquiao did it best, I thought, spreading their series out over several years with other opponents mixed in between. Compare that to Marquez-Vasquez, which had even more exciting fights, but those two guys fought each other 3 or 4 times in a row, and by the end of the series, I was pretty much tired of both of them. Either way, I'm still skeptical AJ and Fury happens. Wasn't there a 30-day cutoff to find a venue, and it's been 3 weeks since the original. It's been more than that, but anyway. I don't know. Thanks for the email, Rick. I don't know if I agree. I think the 2-fight clause for the upper echelon fighters, I think that is a way to secure the paydays. Let's make no mistake, and again, I don't mean to keep talking about Floyd, but Floyd opened up the eyes to a lot of fighters in regards to trying to make the most money you can, which I agree with. Traditionally, up until Floyd Mayweather, or at least until the 80s, I know Sugar Ray Leonard and Tommy Hearns and Marvin Hagler were making some big paydays back in the 80s, which was not too common up to that point. But, you know, a fighter's journey to making money is far and few in between. And I think what happens when fighters reach a certain level and they are in demand, so to speak, that they try to max their revenue as much as they can. By fighting a 2-fight fight against, especially a fight of this magnitude, regardless of whether the first fight was boring or not, they come up with all, and especially today, everybody comes up with all kinds of excuses of why their performance wasn't the way it should have been, or why they got beat, or what have you. I do think that immediate rematches are more important than letting it stretch out. Although I love the point you made with Pacquiao and Marquez, and then, of course, Vasquez-Marquez. And then you could go with the Mickey Ward or Arturo Gotti fights, you know, the Jake LaMotta, Sugar Ray Robinson fights. I mean, all of those fights that multiple, you know, fights took place have their own meaning. But when you have, you know, top-notch fights, especially in today's world of boxing where there's a gazillion titles out there, and you got some, I got some, and we're fighting a unification, yes, I think that that's good. As far as putting a division on hold, well, you know what? It's not like there's such great fighters after the top 3 or 4 anyway. And this last one's from my man James. He says, hey, Billy, I'm happy to be out at a hospital and listening to you again, even if you guys are only on once a week. If I'd been healthier, I've sent you my top 10 boxers just after New Year's. Well, maybe next year. First and foremost, before I go on, James, I hope you're doing well. I'm glad to hear you're out at a hospital. I know that you were battling some health issues last time you communicated with us, so I'm very happy that we received this email from you, and my thoughts and prayers go out to you to recover as quickly as possible, my man. James has been a listener for a long time on this show, and I hope you're on the rebound, brother. He says, anyway, I don't know what's worse, having Showtime pipe in canned crowd noise or the long gaps of silence on ESPN Plus's Muthani against Edwards broadcast. Showtime's canned applause made the show seem cheesy, and ESPN's quiet stretches made theirs look remarkably low budget. What do you think? Listen, there's nothing like watching a live boxing match live. There's nothing. I, too, can't stand canned cheers and stuff. If you watch any of the old film of the Gillette boxing series and all the other ones in the 50s and early 60s, all of those punches, you know, the fans, that was all canned. They did not have the technology they have today. They filmed it and went back and dubbed all this stuff. They did have the announcing on it, but so I'm with you, man. I think we need to move forward in life in general, and hopefully get things back to normal. Listen, I appreciate you guys joining us today. Today we got a little out of whack because Microsoft decided to do an update. Not that I'm making excuses. We did the show anyway. But next week, we're going to do our Saul Canelo Alvarez and Billy Joe Saunders post-fight show. So we will be talking about that fight next week. My prediction on that fight, similar to Dax's and Alex's, is Canelo Alvarez will win the fight. Billy Joe Saunders, I believe, will be stopped in this fight, although he's slick and Canelo is okay with going the distance and winning decisions. I think he's going for the knockout in this one. It's just my opinion and my thoughts and my prediction. Canelo Alvarez by knockout. But you'll hear our post-fight thoughts next week. So make sure you tune in next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, I'll leave you with this. Ciao, baby.